Thank you so much for your kind words, Muddassir and Dr. Quamar. I am very heartened by your kind words and equally excited and equally endeared by our mutual visits and memories of those visits. So thank you very much. And thank you all for attending today. This paper, and it is a paper, was actually presented originally at an academic conference a few years ago. And it has since been published in a US academic journal that is supported by the United States Air Force. And I will show you the link for the journal publication of the paper at the end of the presentation. So it has gotten a lot of interest, even within the United States Department of Defense, for the purpose of this paper, which is counter-terrorism, counter-narco terrorism, and assisting intelligence communities, among others, including law enforcement. So there was an expressed purpose behind writing this paper and luckily getting it published, especially to get it disseminated in the institutions of law enforcement and counterterrorism, because such nuanced cultural or popular cultural tools as this need to be in the telescope of the law enforcement community and of counterterrorism and intelligence communities, in my view. Just a couple of things to mention here. Of course, all the views in this presentation are personal. Also, I just want to warn you that although I have spared you any graphic images, this has to do with musical lyrics of two specific genres. One is Jihadist Nasheeds, which invoke violence and glorify violence, and Narco Corridos, which are Mexican narco folkloric ballads with music and instruments that not only glorify and invoke violence, but entail descriptions that are of violence and of their victims in the most grotesque manner. And I'll get into those details in a moment. So I just, in the bottom of the slide, I want you to be aware that some of the descriptions which are in writing and not in pictures, which I spared you, may be graphic and offensive in terms of violence. So please be aware of that. Next, please. So I will not read everything line by line, but I'll just highlight some of the main points that I cover in this presentation, which again is based on a paper. That there are two major musical genres that I look at here. One is the Jihadist Nasheeds, which have origins in non-jihadist or non-violent Islamic observance or practice or custom of nasheeds. And a nasheed is an a cappella, meaning voice only, without any instruments type of genre, where people sing. It is the equivalent, I like to describe it as an equivalent to hymns in the Christian churches, when you sing hymns. But in this particular case, mainstream Islam, global Muslims who are not violent, and this is outside of the jihadist context, the nasheed is very much popular and is known globally to be sung like a hymn, to praise the Prophet Muhammad, and perhaps reciting Quranic verses and other things, particularly things like encouraging the good Muslim to remain righteous, and of course praising Allah or God. Similarly, you have an origin to narco corridos that has nothing to do with narcos or drug cartels. The origins are the historical historical Mexican ballads or folk songs that had nothing to do with violence um, or drugs or narcos. And all of these origins of the Nasheed and Corridos have to do with history. They go back far in history rather than having to do with the contemporary context of Nasheed in jihadist context and narco corridos in the narco context. So basically what we have here is the jihadists have, let's just say, hijacked the tradition of nasheeds for their own agendas and purposes. And similarly, the narcos, drug cartels are using the narco corridos, which actually have their own bands and composers and singers that only cater to glorifying the drug cartel leader that finances them. So I'll get into a bit of the details on those in just a moment, but understand that narco corridos in particular, but even jihadist nasheeds, pose their respective operatives and drug cartel leaders as Robin Hood figures, meaning that in their own context, for the jihadists, those who were operatives and quote unquote martyrs are considered heroes for their cause. And for the narco corrido bands, the drug cartel leaders who finance them are glorified as Robin Hood-like figures who, let's just take El Chapo, for example, who engages in drug cartel activities, but supports the poor people in his home state of Sinaloa, for example. So they are given this iconoclasty, if I can call it, iconography and symbolism of being very heroic in the eyes of the popular class, right? Or especially the lower economic classes. The study examines and analyzes these two genres of music in the context of terrorism or jihadism, if you want to call it, and respectively narco-terrorism. Notice that also both of these genres popularize in their lyrics crimes of violence and desensitize audiences to the extreme brutality and that they praise and glorify in their lyrics, in their songs. The popularization is what's very troubling, because even if an audience or individuals like the songs and the lyrics, they might not necessarily sympathize with the organization, whether it's a drug cartel or a jihadist group. However, they kind of inadvertently are supporting it, especially the narco corridos, by perhaps downloading or streaming their songs, or in hard copy forms, they are sold as CDs. So the bands of narco corridos are doing it mainly for fame, but also for fortune. It is for profit as well. So I'll get into more details on that in a moment, but the paper addresses questions like, what are the implications of the dissemination of these messaging tools of both the jihadists and the narco corridos to law enforcement and counterterrorism efforts, and to intelligence communities? How do we approach it, especially in terms of in a democracy like the United States and also Mexico, that since you have freedoms and rights of expression, how do you approach this? It's a very troubling concept, because this is not kind of black and white crime in itself. This is creative expression, right? And then, of course, they have the advantage of using YouTube videos, Twitter and Facebook and other social media platforms to disseminate their songs and messages. And especially messaging is a means and tool for, the Narco Corridos and Nasheeds are tools for messaging for each group's causes. And that's also troubling for us in terms of recruitment, okay, or potential recruitment. Next. So let me start with talking about, in general, the nonviolent context of Islamic nasheeds. Again, they're chanting or singing a cappella with no musical instruments. If there are any, it's only going to be percussions. And they also have kind of their own versions throughout the world. But mainly they're hymns that praise God or Allah and the Prophet Muhammad. And the person who sings it is called a munshid. Okay, and in Urdu language, and particularly nasheeds are popular in South Asia. In Urdu, it's called a nazm. And again, it can be sung by anyone. You see the little girl on the bottom right there, and if you're interested, she's singing in Islamic. Please don't go back, please. Go back one, Muddassir. Yeah, thank you. So she's singing, if you're interested, there's the link, the YouTube link. She's singing an Islamic nazm or nasheed in Urdu, but mainly you're going to find them in Arabic unless you're in South Asia. But the jihadists definitely sing the nasheeds in Arabic. But again, ISIS in particular was very savvy in providing their messaging in multiple languages. So you might come across a few nasheeds in other languages, but mainly it'll be in Arabic. So on the left, you see some percussions used. The thing to notice here also is that where in mainstream Islam, you're going to see nasheeds by males or females, in particular, this little girl you see. In the jihadist nasheeds, you'll never see females. It'll strictly be males singing nasheeds. Okay, next. All right, so just to tell you, a lot of the ISIS nasheeds have been pulled out and censored by YouTube. So you're not going to find many, but I managed to find this one on Vimeo on the right here. I don't know if it's still there, but you might be able to find it if you're interested to hear what a nasheed sounds like, a jihadist nasheed. On the left is Al-Qaeda, a jihadi nasheed by Al-Qaeda, and they actually are known to have adopted it first in the jihadist context. But they're not actually, in terms of contemporary, they're not the absolute first. If you think of how far back jihadist nasheeds go, scholars are not sure exactly what date that they can pin the origins on in terms of jihadist nasheeds. But we can say that some nasheeds came out during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, 1979 and thereafter, and also during the Algerian Civil War in the 1990s. So they're not as contemporary as ISIS and let's say 9/11. There are a few incidents or cases where jihadist nasheeds precede those, even 9/11, and go all the way back to Afghanistan, okay, and Algeria. What's interesting, I put it in green font there on the left, is if you go to that YouTube site for the jihadist nasheed on the left there from 2008, notice the comments. What the public is posting comments below the screen of that particular nasheed, and most of those comments are very much praising and in admiration of that jihadist nasheed. And again, let me caution you that some of the admiration is purely for the art form rather than for who's doing it and for what cause. But a lot of them, you'll notice in the comments, are actually not only supporting, not only praising the art form, but also supporting the cause and the messaging. Okay, so that's yet another angle to consider. On the bottom there, I've given you the name of the go-to scholar. He is the authority on ISIS translation, ISIS documents translated into English. Ayman Jawad al-Tamimi. Actually, if you go to his website, it's there on the bottom there, you'll find that it's endless. He has uploaded so many, I would say, dare say thousands of documents that have been recovered from raiding ISIS places, right, hideouts and cells. And they're all in Arabic, so he translates them to English and posts them on his website. So he has an entire segment on translated jihadist nasheeds from Al-Qaeda as well as from ISIS. So if you're interested, he's the guy. Next, please. So I'll just give you a little example. When ISIS was starting to get defeated in middle of 2017, even though they were starting to lose territory because of American and other allies starting to carry out airstrikes against ISIS in Iraq and Syria, and they were very rapidly losing territory, a lot of global ISIS supporters and loyalists worried about the integrity, and that's a strange word to use for ISIS, but the status of ISIS. And so they issued a global ISIS Nasheed in June 2017 that in Arabic is called Dawlati Bakia, which means my state is remaining, to ensure and reassure their global followers and loyalists and sympathizers that even though ISIS is losing territory, they're not going to be snuffed out completely. They're still in it for the fight. So just a few select lyrics here. It's a song, it's a nasheed of defiance, basically. It says, my state is remaining, firing at the enemy. So one of the themes you're going to see in ISIS nasheeds is attacking the enemy violently. Its soldiers shout that it is remaining. It's referring to ISIS soldiers. So their operatives they refer to as soldiers. Its path will not be eliminated as its light seeks to expand. So again, it's a message of reassurance that even though they're being bombed right and left and losing territory, that the essence of ISIS is still not eliminated and continues and will continue. Next. So for, this continues the same lyrics from the same song, but I just want to highlight a few of the ongoing themes you'll find in their nasheeds. Raining down with spears, for example. Spears are very common symbols and themes. A gathering of dogs, misguided enemy. There's a lot of ridicule and condemnation of the enemies. The imagery of swords, and especially a man holding a sword on horseback is a very common imagery among ISIS. They call themselves the lions because of the imagery and symbolism of what a lion's bravery and power and fierceness is. Faithful soldiers, again, believers. They consider themselves the pure, quote unquote, pure believers as opposed to the infidels. Kill them by the thousands, again, vanquishing the enemy. Swords and knives, blood. Blood, you're going to see a lot in ISIS nasheeds and also Al-Qaeda, invoking the Quran and Allah, and the word victory is all over their nasheeds. Next, please. Again, in November then, so we go from June to November, where again, they're being defeated quite badly on the battlefront, both in Iraq and Syria. They issued another Jihadist Nasheed, an ISIS Nasheed that says, again, we will not be vanquished, right? Or my state will not be vanquished. So the caliphate in real life, here it was being slowly, or in some cases quickly eliminated. And again, global ISIS sympathizers and loyalists were worrying. So they issued another kind of, let's just say, an addendum to their June 2017 Nasheed. And so here they're saying, again, that the theme of blood is there, praising Allah. The spear is not broken, right? So the message being they're still fighting. What noble men they are, their own soldiers, right? Enemies come forth in hellfire, they will be burned. That's another common theme, that enemies will go to hell, right, and suffer. You will either be killed or taken prisoner. Our swords have not ceased to drip with your blood. Okay. Next. All right, switching gears to Narco Corridos. Believe it or not, the very best definition of Narco Corridos that I could find came from Amazon. And Amazon says, and you can go to the links on the bottom to find this, it says the kind of description of the history of corridos in general. And corridos simply means songs in Spanish. So it's a ballad, right? The corrido or ballad. In Mexico's oldest and most respected song styles. Again, this is prior to drug cartels hijacking it. And there were roadside ballads, and they were modeled on folkloric ballads. And what the drug cartels have done is they found music composers who they finance, and then hire bands to sing what are now called narco corridos. So they've taken that classical corrido tradition and now use it for narco purposes. So most of the corrido protagonists now are the drug cartel leaders and traffickers themselves. And in Los Angeles or in the border towns, you'll find that the narco corrido bands are proliferating. Today, Mexico has outlawed the proliferation of narco corridos. However, in the black market, you can still find a lot of narco corridos in CD forms, even the bands going on tour throughout the United States, but where it's not illegal. But also in Mexico, they're extremely popular, even though they're illegal. So it's the Mexican equivalent of gangsta rap, okay, where they use creative lyrics, but the lyrics also are extremely violent. They're also extremely misogynistic and not very flattering of women. And it's very much like gangsta rap, okay? And they use narco corridos to tell eloquent stories of immigrant life, especially in the United States, and to deal with the twists and turns of contemporary life. However, the main purpose of narco corridos is to ridicule, again, just like the Jihadist Nasheeds, ridicule their enemies. That would be the drug cartels' enemies, which could be other rival drug cartels, by the way, but also law enforcement and others. Okay, it's far more popular. Narco corridos are far more popular than most English speakers can imagine. One of the top 5 stations in Los Angeles plays narco corridos all day long, and the corrido stars appear regularly on the Latin Billboard charts. So extremely popular, and the bands themselves go on tour regularly. The bands and composers who are, again, financed by drug cartel leaders, they seek fame and fortune and profits in particular from their songs. They are copyrighted. So you have to be careful about what you do with their lyrics. You can be brought into a legal court and sued. Okay, so you have to be very careful. Next, please. Yeah, so just a warning that the reason why this is alarming is because of what drug cartels are known for. And this is the corridos, the narco corridos glorify these kinds of violent behaviors. So along with beheadings and hangings and shootings, drug cartels are known for training their recruits in disemboweling, filleting, boiling victims in vats, torturing, and flaying. Drug cartels have left rows of decapitated heads in streets long before Islamic State. And these atrocities, despite those, and despite them being incorporated into narco corrido lyrics, excuse me, are extremely popular. The corridos are extremely popular throughout Latin America and even in the United States. In fact, very popular in the United States. Also know that Narco Corridos actually broadcast on the police monitors in law enforcement in Mexico, and they will taunt the law enforcement officials and police and threaten individuals through their corridos, and they will even announce an execution through a corrido, as well as when it happens, they will praise the drug cartel leader behind it. Okay, next. So there's a fantastic documentary. I don't think it's on Netflix anymore, but it's called Narco Cultura, and it gives you an entire profile of what Narco Corridos band life is like. And then it contrasts that with the drug cartels' violent victims of violence. If you look it up and want to watch it, be aware that it is extremely graphic. So it's an extremely graphic documentary. So if you don't have the stomach for watching the violence and in some cases even the forensics after violence has occurred, for example, autopsy imagery, don't watch this. Okay, but a lot of my research came from this documentary as well as from other books and journal articles, etc. But for example, Booknas is a singer or a band leader for a narco corrido band. And here are some of his lyrics. And in the documentary, they show him on stage with his band. He's singing. The venue is somewhere in the United States, most likely in Los Angeles. And the crowd is jam-packed in the stadium, and they're going wild. They love this band. So he sings in his lyrics with an AK-47 and a bazooka on my shoulder. And they have actual props of AK-47s and bazookas on their shoulders on stage. Cross my path and I'll chop your head off is the lyric. We're bloodthirsty, crazy, and we like to kill. And then in the chorus, the audience sings along with the band saying, we're the best at kidnapping. Our gang always travels in a caravan with bulletproof vests ready to execute. I'm number one, code name M1. Some of the band leaders have code names. I'm backed up by El Chapo. El Chapo used to be the head of the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico. Right now, he's in a prison in the United States. My name is Manuel Torres Felix. That's the name of the band member, who's leader, who's probably the composer of the lyrics. Sending greetings from Culiacan, which is the capital of Sinaloa. Another band, its lyrics says, sending reinforcements to decapitate. El Macho leads wearing a bulletproof vest. Bazooka in hand with experience. Wearing grenades, death is within. The girls take off their clothes, a private party like you can't imagine. So all kinds of imagery here being glorified, right? Decapitation, throwing grenades, using a bazooka, and of course, the misogyny towards females. Next, please. So I'm not going to read this, but this is just to tell you that in the paper itself, you're going to see this comparison. The far left and far right columns tell you the differences between Jihadist Nasheeds and Narco Corridos. The middle column tells you the similarities. And as you can see, the similarities outnumber the differences. If you're interested, and I know this is kind of hard to see on the screen, you can find this table in the paper itself. Next, please. So to conclude, the power, influence, and the absolute global reach of both the Jihadist Nasheeds and Narco Corridos give terrorist organizations, including narco terrorists, many advantages over law enforcement. Social media and various internet tools afford terrorist organizations, including the narcos, an edge that they effectively exploit. And global public demand for both Nasheeds and Narco Corridos allows them to proliferate and sustain their longevity. So even when ISIS is gone in terms of physical caliphate in their conquered territories, their Nasheeds allow them to live on. Counterterrorism experts, intelligence communities, and law enforcement authorities need to consider innovative ways to disrupt the momentum and the popular appeal of Jihadist Nasheeds and Narco Corridos without offending cultural and religious sensitivities. Because again, these genres exist in a non-violent context as well, as part of religion and culture in their respective contexts. Countering narco-terrorism requires addressing the demand and consumption side of the illicit drugs equation. The United States is the highest consumer of the drugs that are smuggled from Mexico into the United States, but also elsewhere. So we have a very high or primary responsibility in the United States to address this problem. Anything less will eventually threaten global peace and security. That's my opinion, because of the magnitude of the popularity globally of both Narco Corridos and Jihadist Nasheeds. Next, please. That's the link to my article, and Muddassir has the slides, so you're welcome to get it from him. And if you just want to look it up on Google, type in my name and Narco Corridos and Jihadist Nasheeds, it should come up. Next, please. And this concludes my presentation. Thank you for your patience and for listening. Let me just point out that the image on the right that says Narco Cults is one of the books I used. And again, it's extremely graphic. So if you intend to get this book or look it up, be prepared. It has a lot of graphic pictures in it, violently graphic. All right, thank you all. I'm ready for questions.